Robin, thanks for the intro. My name's Rav. I'm going to talk to you for the next 20 minutes or so about some learnings around positioning customer success as a growth engine, and then we'll have about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So as I mentioned, my name's Rob Dhaliwal. I like to describe myself as a recovering CS executive. I spent about 20 odd years in enterprise software companies. The last sort of 13 of those were in fast-growing startups, probably similar to the businesses that you're in. I now work as a venture capital investor, getting to invest in great companies like Tessian, Event Store, I think Margaret is here. And I'm also a board member and an advisor. If anyone would like to follow along or connect during the session or after, feel free to do so. I'm very, very easy to get hold of. And actually, today's talk is based on an article I published a couple of weeks ago on my Medium, which I'll post a link to at the end. So as I mentioned, I've been lucky enough to work for some really great global multinational companies, but as I say, towards the end of my CS executive career, it was really more of a sales and CS career. I was able to work very early at some fast-growing startups, and it's the experience from these that I want to share with you today because it's the most relevant. So what are we going to talk about in the next 20 minutes? We're going to have a very, very brief recap of the last decade in the SaaS industry in particular. And then I'm going to share with you a little bit about what corporate boards are thinking about right now and what they're going to be thinking about early next year. And then we'll talk about well, there's way more than 4 steps to position yourself as a growth engine, but I've picked out the 4 that I think are not only really important, but actionable as well. Hopefully you'll feel the same. And then we'll break for questions, right? So hopefully that will lead to a good discussion. So the last decade in SaaS has been very unusual. We've had a decade, well actually more than a decade, of very, very artificially held low interest rates. Even after the 2008 financial crash, interest rates super low. COVID, interest rates super low, right? And what that has allowed startups to do is raise huge investment rounds at ridiculous valuations. So when I started to become in the investment world about 3 and a bit years ago, we were writing maybe $1 million check on a $9 million valuation, 10 million. As of the middle of last year, where it went to a height of craziness, we were writing $1.5 million at a 40 million valuation, sometimes even if they hadn't built the product yet, right? That's insane. What that money, that cheap money, has allowed people to do is build companies and not be very efficient, right? I can just mask a whole bunch of inefficiencies. I don't have to have any profitability. I can delay that and keep delaying it. I've read many, many S1s where the company said, when we go public, we don't ever anticipate being profitable, right? That's crazy. And it's allowed founders in particular to solve problems by just throwing more headcount at the problem, right? I've got almost infinite access to cheap money. Why should I take the time to figure out where the problem is? I'll just throw more bodies at it, right? Unfortunately, that era of cheap money is well and truly over. We're not really feeling it now. We will definitely feel it from January onwards. And unfortunately, it's not coming back, not anytime soon. So what we're really experiencing, and I don't want to be like a Debbie Downer here, is a structural shift in the macroeconomic world. We are looking at 10 years, minimum of 10 years, low or lost growth, high interest rates. So this is the world we all have to adjust to, right? Software is no longer recession-proof. It's still a high-margin business, but if you look at the bellwethers of the industry in SaaS, people like Salesforce, they are cutting back. They just, well, yesterday they cut back on one of their CEOs. Their numbers, they're still making money, they're still sensible businesses, they're still profitable, but they're cutting back because software is no longer considered by the markets as being a safe bet that it normally has been. So what are corporate boards thinking about, right? The boards of your companies, boards of startups. I'm on a couple of startup boards. What are we thinking about? Well, we're thinking about how much runway do we have? So how much cash have we actually got to keep operations going? And we're also thinking, how do we extend it? Because we're not sure how easy or hard it's going to be to fundraise soon. It's going to be hard. And we're not sure how cheap that money's going to be, right? Similarly, they're thinking, what's our burn rate? How much are we actually spending on running the business? Headcount, software, all these other things. And how do we reduce it, right? So how do we cut back? How do we extend our runway? And how do we cut back on our spend? Right? What that means is increased scrutiny for everybody. Everybody in the startup is under increased scrutiny. And the way boards think, and this is a gross oversimplification, but for the purpose of our discussion today, it'll be useful framing. Boards tend to think about startups or companies in terms of, there's people who build a product, right? That's not just engineering, that's all the things around engineering. Product management, product marketing, all that stuff. There's people who sell the product, right? That's not just AEs, that's all the infrastructure around AEs, demand gen, marketing, SDRs, BDRs, everything. And there's people who support the product, right? Once it's out there, we've got people using it, there's people who support that product, customer success, support, professional services, et cetera, right? If you are looking to reduce burn or extend runway, this is a prime candidate for the board to cut, right? You go back to your investors. We can debate the logic of this or the sense of this. For cultural reasons, whatever it is, it's the prime candidate to cut. So for all of us in the room, it's far better to be associated with selling the product than it is to be supporting the product. All of these functions will have cuts, will be under scrutiny, but it's going to be much harder for someone to pull the plug on selling the product in a tough macroeconomic environment. So that's why it's vital to start thinking about how you position yourself as a revenue growth engine, right? In CS, we are really good at growth. Growth of adoption, growth of users, growth of feature usage, growth of champions, all those sorts of things. We've got to now add revenue growth to that mix of what we like to grow. So that means we need to all become revenue leaders, right? What does that mean? It doesn't mean that you have to be a horrible salesperson and carry a quota. There's 4 steps that I would recommend that we think about, right? Number 1, define what you do for the board, not for anyone else. You are going to get asked to come and speak at the board. Board member's going to stop you in the elevator. Define what you do in a language that they understand. If you define what you do as saying, well, we're the customer's trusted advisor, we drive their desired outcomes, we're here to deliver value, for a board member, that's too vague. They do not understand what that means. What board members care about: revenue, speed and efficiency, especially efficiency. If we put $1 in the business, what do we get back for it? Business value, not just what customers see, but what value does it add back to our business? And expertise. They care about a lot more, but those are like the 4 key ones that they really, really care about. So if you're going to define yourself to the board, think about what the board is interested in when you do it. So here's an example. We drive more revenue, we create the conditions for more revenue and faster business value with our change management skills, right? That's what our function does. Anybody can understand that. It's not nebulous at all. Now they may ask you, well, how do you do that with your change management skills? That's the activities and that's the engagements you do as a team. You can talk to them about that. Don't lead with the activities, lead with the outcomes. Step number 2, own a revenue number. There's 2 types of targets to consider, right? There's the leading targets. I like to call these TTV, time to value targets. If we can't show the customer the value of the thing they've purchased, and if we can't show it to them quickly, we might as well all pack up and go home as a company, right? Because all we'll be doing is sitting on a churn time bomb, and the company will eventually go out of business. So it might be deployment speed. Actually, they can't see any value till we finish this very complex deployment project. So I might set a target for that. All deployments done in 60 days. Could be they see value when there's a certain level of user adoption or certain level of consumption of the service, data flowing through the service, integrations, etc. We can have a target for that. Could be just feature usage. There's not much to deploy, but we've got to get the product sticky. There's 5, 6 key features we need every customer to use, right? So always be thinking, when I say leading, this is a quarterly target. What should we be tracking every quarter? The business works on a quarterly cycle. You need to work on a quarterly cycle. Activities or sentiment are not leading targets. They're certainly not leading targets the board cares about. I've been in too many board meetings where the head of CS is, we did 65 quarterly business reviews, we did 25 executive business reviews, we did this many events, and we all go, so what, right? Activities are important, but you do those to drive some kind of outcome, right? So think about what the leading targets are. The leading targets, you do those because they actually feed into and allow you to achieve the lagging targets, right? Net revenue retention, gross revenue retention. Every CS leader should own both of those numbers because that's really what the board cares about. How much revenue are we retaining and how much is that revenue growing by? And if you're in a company that accelerates to Series A, Series B, Series C, that will be the biggest revenue number in the company, right? Salesforce announced its figures this week. 78% of their revenue comes from existing customers. Imagine being on the hook for saying, I own that 78%. You would get a lot of attention at the board, and you would probably get a lot of the resources that you need. So some tips, some practical tips. Track all of this stuff and report on it on a quarterly cadence. The lagging indicators may be yearly. You can still break them down quarterly, but track all of this stuff, even your leading indicators. Track, report on it quarterly, and get used to forecasting. We forecast this many deployments are going to get done in the quarter. We forecast this many customers are going to drive this much incremental adoption. Get used to forecasting. Make sure when you're reporting, you're looking at quarter-on-quarter and year-on-year trends. That's how the board thinks. They say, well, this is great. How does it compare to last quarter? How does it compare to this time last year? So you want to be always making sure your numbers have a pattern, quarter-on-quarter and year-on-year. Share these widely and regularly with anyone internally who will listen. We're so focused on making our customers successful, we forget to empathize with the other customer we have, everyone else inside the company. I don't know a single sales leader, not one, that closes a deal and doesn't shout about it as loud as they can. There is nothing stopping you doing that when you do a complex renewal or a renewal with an uplift. I want to see that bell being rung in the sales channel, right? Get your numbers in the board pack. Who here presents regularly to the board? One person, that is a problem. Two, okay, that's a problem. If you are not presenting to the board, or your numbers are not in the board pack, it doesn't exist as far as the board's concerned. It's in support, I can cut it, all right? Present them to the board. If you're in a small enough company and it's early, make your CEO have you come in and talk to the 2 slides to show all your quarter-on-quarter trends. There is no harm in asking. You don't ask, you don't get. Step number 3. Learn to speak the language of revenue. Whether we like it or not, this is how boards and executives think. They think in terms of revenue. You have to speak their language. I heard it described in a comment the other day, is you have to learn the love language of the company, right? The love language is revenue. Part of that is for you guys to be across the sales forecast. There's nothing stopping you opening up HubSpot and Salesforce and looking at the forecast and looking at the deals and seeing where they are and finding out what's going on with them, right? Review those regularly with your team. This is what's coming down the pipe. This is what we might expect. I'm going to go off and find, I used to actually parcel this out to my team. Go and find out what's going on with these 5 deals. Go and get attached to these 4. Because we need to know, because we're going to have this customer shortly. And on that point, there's nothing stopping you getting attached to key deals, right? If you're not in a pod structure where there's a CS person and an SC and an AE aligned on the territory, go create one. Go and talk to them and go, hey, I want to sit in the back of the room when you do your forecast meeting. I want to learn from you. Massage a salesperson's ego. They'll let you get into any room you want, right? It's really, really important. As I said before, ring the sales bell. You guys have a win, share it. Share it loud. Share it in the all-company Slack channel, at the town hall. Build a slide for the CEO to present. Key renewals, key uplifts. This is what the team did to help these get over the line. All of this is speaking the language of revenue. Yeah? And most importantly, learn how your company sells, right? It is so important to understand, what do these mysterious account executive people do? What's it like? How does it feel to get knocked back from a customer? How do they do on the kickoff call? Do they even remotely understand what we do? And piggyback off whatever sales training they get, right? The reason being is, if you think about what CS professionals do and sales professionals do, we try to get access to people. We try to negotiate with them to do stuff. We try to influence them. Sales do all of that, and they get training for it. Go on the same training, sit in the back of the room. It doesn't cost the company anything extra. Step number 4, change the culture. It's in red because this is hard. This is what you hear all the time in CS. Well, if I have a revenue target, the customer won't trust me. This is almost a mantra. It's wrong. It's completely wrong. All of you can change that culture. We've all experienced really poor sales behavior. I have, you all have, you have all seen it, both personally and professionally, and we've all had to deal with the mess of poor sales behavior. But this is the important thing. All the truly best sellers, the great ones, the really good ones, they sell on the basis of creating trust, and they focus on mutual benefit. They understand, if I drive value with the customer, the outcome of that value is revenue. And that's how we all need to think, right? So don't be afraid of being a seller. Be one of those best sellers. That's what you want. That's the model. Forget what you've seen. Forget the bad behavior. That's a model of what not to do. It does exist, and it's not going away anytime soon. Be one of the best sellers. And I think for CS folk, we're all hardwired to think about value and to try and drive value. So we're very, very well placed to become some of the best sellers in the business. So keep focused on mutual value. Work to be multi-threaded. One of the most challenging things in CS is I only have one stakeholder. I only have one person that I have to talk to. And that person's pretty low down the food chain. Go on that sales training and get really good at and learning techniques for finding more stakeholders in your company, right? Finding them, talking to them, wait, what's going on in your part of the business? How can we be helping? Do you know what your team over here is doing? Don't be shy of making those connections. The worst is people will ignore you. This helps you to discover opportunities where you can add, as a company, not you individually, but as a company can add more value. If you can add more value, value eventually will hopefully translate to revenue. And log all of this stuff. Record it. Success qualified leads, whatever you want to call it. I used to make my teams every week, every other week. How many more stakeholders did we add to the account this week? This one was still single-threaded. Who else are we going to try and meet? Is it this person's boss? Is it their opposite number in another country? Keep a track of it, log it all, because the future leads from those companies, the deals, will come from one of those connections. Like I say, same with case studies. If you've influenced one, if you've talked to a customer, they've agreed to give you a quote to be a reference, get attribution for it. Make sure it's logged so someone knows this is the source of where this reference came from. That adds to top of funnel revenue. It helps the business to sell. Regularly report on all of these. This is how many new stakeholders we've engaged with. This is how many opportunities we've sent to sales to qualify in or out. This is how many case studies we deserve attribution to. We do all this stuff, but we don't record it in a meaningful way. We just do it almost incidentally. Get attribution. Make sure you have the data to prove it. And the key thing is to create a culture, and this is easier said than done. Don't ask me how to do this because it's very complicated. But create a culture where it's all right to think commercially. We're happy to think commercially because we're thinking if we can add value, we might get some money. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't act commercially. Don't talk to the customer about pricing. Don't talk to them about contract clauses. Don't talk to them about negotiating with procurement. That's not your job. But it's okay to think commercially. Someone else will do that commercial work, the activity, for you, right? And remember, this is the key thing if you don't remember anything else from today, your job's not to make the next sale, it's to enable it to happen. It's a very, very big distinction there, but it's also to prove that you enabled it. And I think this is one of the big challenges we have in CS. We're so busy focusing on the customer that we're not actually getting the proof points to show we set that person up to give us more revenue. That leads to magical thinking amongst founders and the board. Magical thinking such as renewals just happen all on their own. This product is so good, it would never churn even if I didn't have this team. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. Right? I think this would be fine even if we didn't have the team, right? That's because there's no proof points. It's not recorded anywhere. Right? So as a recap, the era of cheap money is over, and it's going to be over for quite a while, right? So this really presents a great opportunity to position as revenue leaders in the business. Not in that sport column, in that sales revenue column. Step one is to define what you do for the board. Yeah? Own a revenue number. You've got all those leading targets, report on those, track them, talk to your team about them in one-to-ones. First 10 minutes is review the number before we get into whatever we talk about at team meetings. Lagging ones, gross and net revenue retention. Eventually that will be the biggest revenue number in the company. Learn to speak the language of revenue. Forecasting, quarter on quarter, year on year. That's one of the easiest things that you can do to present yourselves as revenue leaders. Just talk the language of revenue. And work to change the culture. That won't happen overnight, But if you're senior people in this room, leaders in this room, you can lead the way on that. Create a safe space, like I say, where it's okay to think commercially, but we're just not going to act it. And the final thing is just remember, you have two customers. You have everyone that bought your product and everyone else in the company. And you have to balance the needs of both, right? And that's why it's important to change your language, learn the language of revenue, because that's demonstrating that you're actually trying to balance both of these. These are not mutually exclusive. So with that, I want to thank you all for your kind attention. As I mentioned, this session is based on an article I published a few weeks ago called The Problem with Customer Success. The problem being, no one actually still knows what it is. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you. Oh. Yes, question. Chuck it over, Alex. Go on.
Where's the question at?
I can hear you from here. I'll just repeat it.
Just wanted to know if this is exactly what we are saying, sales team as well. Why should we have two teams then?
Yeah, one's a landing new business and one's growing existing.
You can have one team do the both, right?
You could have one team doing the both. That's not what the purpose of this is. Not what's the ultimate org structure. It's just how do we as professionals think about being revenue leaders. It's actually it's kind of immaterial whether you live in sales or out of sales or in customer. It's what you're measured on and what you produce. The business doesn't care who you report to. And by the way, customer doesn't care who you report to. Yeah? Customer doesn't even care what your job title is. They just want to know, can you help me? Yeah? The challenge is getting your CFO to pay commission out twice to two people. That's a different thing. Yeah?
Hi, sorry. Hi, Rob. I read your article, by the way, and I thought it was excellent.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
If you're not, definitions aside, how do you communicate this to the board if you're not able to if customer success is a misunderstood thing, it's seen as sort of superfluous to
use every company-wide communication channel to start that drumbeat going and reinforce it every time you get up to speak at the company all hands, team meeting, sales leadership meeting, whatever. By the way, just restating the purpose and the mission of the team and keep doing it.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not about changing customer success to some other name. It's just about defining it.
You can, I think it'd be easier to change a name, but that's turned out to be a very controversial topic, which we will not get into today.
What would you change it to?
Yeah. But look, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys, right? Having been in your shoes and now sitting in board meetings, it is astounding after 20 years, people just don't know what this function is. They still don't, right? The ones who do, I'll be perfectly honest, it's a tainted brand for them, right? Their associations with it are poor. Oh yeah, I got to work for that company. It was a nightmare. It cost us so much money. I don't know what those people did, right? Those are the perceptions that you have to change. Yeah, I'm one of the few investors who's walked a mile in CS shoes. Most of them all come from the on-premises era. That's where they made their big money. And so they teach the next generation of investors to build, you should help them build companies the way we built them back in the day when I sold on-premises security software or whatever, right? So the change has to be driven by you guys because you guys are at the coalface. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that you called out in the article that I thought was really good was how much of an echo chamber customer success has become and how actually we need to probably move like a quantum shift to some other name and some other brand.
Yeah, I mean, the rebranding thing aside, that's my personal opinion, and there are definitely very, very strong opinions about that. The echo chamber thing is, again, something to think about, right? It's great. Everybody supports each other. Everyone is willing to share. Everyone is willing to help. But you don't have this in the sales world, right? Because they're all too busy trying to hit their number in the quarter, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that people should be very open to challenging the status quo and go, actually, look, this is great. How does it help us drive more revenue? How does it help your company to achieve its goals? Think about that other customer, the company, right? There was one comment on that article. I don't know if you saw it. I'm going to paraphrase it. It had never occurred to me, this comment, and it is spot on. And I'll paraphrase. You can all go and look at it and then see the person who said it, because I'm not going to mention their name. It said, communities that Rob referenced in the article, not all of them, but some of them, are created by software vendors whose business depends on having more and more people with the customer success job title, regardless of the drag on gross margin it has on their customers. I'm really glad I didn't say that, but it is a key point to think about.
Or is that to demonstrate their commitment to customer success? essentially.
Well, if your business relies on people with your job title, you would create a giant community and promote it because that, and I'm not saying there's a nefarious reason behind that. The byproduct of that, it could create an echo chamber. Yeah. I drank a lot of coffee before the session. I really apologise. It's late in the day.
Hi Rav. I have a question more about where you think client success sits, i.e. like in a commercial function, in an operational function.
I think there's a sales team.
Yeah,
I think there's a sales team, and there should be a growth function in the business, and it should sit in the growth one. And every role in the sales function is mirrored by every role in the growth function. So I have an AE, I have an AM. I have an SE, I have a CSM. I have a demand gen marketer, I have a customer marketer. That's how I see the world.
And the report in line straight into
Report
leadership.
to whoever's really important in the company that cares about money.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, yeah. It's what's important is not who you report to; it's how you are measured and what you're on the hook for.
Yeah. I also have another question. I don't know. We're in a B2B to C.
Okay, that's really tough. B2B.
Yeah, and revenue is generated from our end users as well as our clients.
Yeah.
And therefore, owning the revenue number becomes more of a challenge because there's other people putting up their hands saying, well, I developed a product that generates money, but we are the ones
I don't
paying.
care how product people are paid. Actually, they should just be paid on how many people use their part of the product as opposed to the money. So this is where you get into a turf war and you go, no, I'm owning this number and it's mine.
Yeah.
Because I can guarantee you, if you put your hand up and say to CEO, I want to own the net revenue retention number, the first person who's going to say no is the VP sales.
Yeah.
Because they want that number.
Yeah.
And if that is not proof point enough that you should own it, I don't know what is. General rule of thumb, if salespeople complain about it, it's probably the right thing to do. Yeah?
That's a good point.
Yeah? I do this, I have told this to founders all the time. They go, oh, well, if we change the commissions, are they going to complain about it? Yeah, then it's probably the right thing. Have you ever met a happy salesperson? I haven't. My quota's too big, my territory's too small, I don't have enough leads.
Hey, Rob.
Hello.
Thanks for this. This is very inspiring, super cool. I was curious for expansion, so for growing existing book, would you target the CSMs to closing the expansion?
No, because if it takes two skills to sell to a customer, I need an SE, I need a product use case person and a commercial person. It should take two sets of skills to expand that person, right? Unless you have a terribly simple consumer style product, which you just get more money through consumption, finding someone who can do all of the product use case, value, business transformation stuff, and happens to be a great salesperson, they don't exist. That Venn diagram's tiny, right? And if they did exist, they'd be in sales and they'd be making a fortune. Yeah. So no, I think that's the point about enabling the sale. Don't make it, enable it. Make sure it happened and make sure people realize you made it happen. Yeah.
Again?
Yeah, sorry.
You think your quota on questions. Right, yeah.
Does anyone else want to?
Yeah.
Just to add to that question, what if they just want to sign a contract? Are you saying that you have to hand them over to someone else who needs to send them?
I don't know why that can't be automated.
That's true.
DocuSign.
Yeah.
You will get it in 3 weeks. If you
So
haven't got it, let me know.
who gets commission on that then? Who would get commission on that if it was?
Depends on what you get targeted on, right? Here's the thing, right? I've sat in many, many deals, big deals, where the AE gets all the kudos for closing the deal, and I know for a fact the deal only closed because of the SE, right? That SE doesn't get attribution. But they get comped on it. That's the difference. You think, well, all right, I didn't get the attribution for it, even though I did all the hard yards, but I got the money for it. It's better to get the money for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I have a question over here. Are we right for time? Am I not eating into anyone else's session? Okay, right.
So in my organisation, you put up a slide there saying, think commercially but don't act commercially, something like that?
Yeah, not overtly commercially, yeah.
Yeah, but our CSMs are responsible for cross-sell and upsell.
Okay, does that work for your customers?
Yeah.
That's right, that's
It
fine
does.
then. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's you know, if it works, don't mess with it.
Okay.
Right? That statement is in there because of the pushback most teams will have. Is like, oh, I don't want to have a number, I don't want to own a number. That's going to make me into an evil person that has to do evil things. And it's like, just don't act commercially. Right? You'll just lead with value, because if you lead with enough value and do things that salespeople do, like go find new stakeholders, go demonstrate value, get to know more people, don't be single-threaded, then good things will happen. Yeah. I would personally, based on your description, I would say that you guys are account managers. You're not what I would consider CS people. But that's just splitting hairs, right? Doesn't matter what you call it.
It is a bit. But when you said you sort of pair up on the customer success side what you might have on the sales side, so you have
you just mirror it, yeah.
Yeah. Would the AEs in that instance report into head of customer success? Not the AEs. What do you call it? AMs? Yeah.
They would be in the growth function. It's whoever leads the growth function.
Okay. Yeah.
AE is account executive, salesperson, typically new business, and they're normally supported by a sales engineer or solutions engineer, technical person that helps them sell. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Sorry, we just use these terms and we just figure everybody knows them. Yeah. Any other questions?
Sales engineers being cross-function, able to do new business and CS.
So I don't know if you heard the question, should sales engineers be new business and CS? In an ideal world, yes, but the problem is there's a scaling problem there. So often that is the case in a very early stage seed startup, the kind of companies I invest in, because you don't have enough resource and they've got the right skills. But as you get bigger, there is this push-pull between, go help this existing, oh no, go and just work on this deal. Right? And that push-pull, then it starts to break. So in theory, yes. But if you then think, well, actually, I've got to build an organization where they mirror each other, so I've just got enough people, that's the ultimate target. But in theory, if it will fit with how you're scaling and the volume of customers, then that's not a bad idea.
Have you seen an organization where you've had two separate SEs?
I spoke with a CS lead yesterday who actually, the SEs report to him. But he's had this problem now. He's like going, I got this push-pull now of getting pulled on new business rather than helping us do the reporting that we need to do to expand existing. So that's where there's also a cultural thing here, right? As just generally as a society, we venerate hunters. No one really cares about farmers that much, right? That's just cultural, right? Do we want to venerate the people who go out in the jungle with a spear and kill animals to bring back, or do we want to grow the person who grows a field of wheat even though that keeps us alive for 10 years, right? So you just got this cultural tension inside companies. Yeah. Does that make sense, yeah?
Yeah, it does. It raises a lot of other questions as well.
Yeah, none of this is easy.
Yeah. If you have, let's say, an ideal world, we have two separate organizations. We've got a new business group of hunters with dedicated SEs, and we've got a group of CSMs who are focused purely on NRR and expansion.
Yeah.
What I can see happening there is that the hunters are going to have longer sales cycles because they're going to want to sell much larger deals so that they can get more of the money before they have to give the customer away to...
Everybody wins in that scenario.
CS.
Everyone wins in that scenario.
Do we?
Yeah, everyone wins.
Surely
Your team might be smaller, but a company gets more revenue.
No.
Yeah.
What you want to do is you want a competitor who takes that approach, because then you just piggyback in off the back of their deals and you go in and sell a small depot.
I would just push back in that it's not always the case that everybody can sell bigger or larger deals, because there are many, many very successful SaaS companies that sell very small ticket size, high volume. Right? So it's going to depend on the nature of your product. Salespeople are paid to think in 12-week increments. So if making the deal bigger is going to take them 36 weeks, they're not going to do it. They're just not going to do it because they're under too much pressure to hit that 12 weeks. You'll probably get the reverse, which is I'll sell a cheaper, smaller, shittier deal because I'll hit my number, pardon my French, I'll hit my number in the quarter, even though I could have gone for the bigger. I've literally sat in a room with an SVP of sales with a giant Swedish company, and they're like thinking, we'll do $1 million, $1.5 million this quarter. And he was like, why don't you just take the 60K deal, right? $1.5 million on the table versus 60, because this guy wants to prioritize hitting his number at the end of the quarter, right?
All comp plans. Everything comes down to comp.
All behavior is governed by how you're measured. Yeah? Your team will behave based on how you measure them. Yeah? They'll optimize for what you tell them to optimize for, which is why you can be one of those best sellers.
What happens when you have a sales SVP who wants 60K and a growth who wants a 1 million? What does the company do?
Well, the salesperson's job finished when the first deal was signed.
But as a customer, the customer will choose one, right? So you.
It's not either or. We're talking about new business versus growing existing. Yeah. So that 60K is a decision before you ever got involved. Yeah. If you want to expand it to $1.5 million, go with God, right? Great. That's good for your number. Yeah. I think we're running out of time. I'll be floating around if anybody wants to ask a question. Thank you. Thanks very much.